I'm Hunter Nash, 42 years old, and for the past 15 years I've been deeply embedded in the world of software architecture at Dynatech Solutions. My career has been dedicated to designing and maintaining complex platforms that currently generate upwards of $120 million in annual revenue for the company. This isn't just a job to me. It's a discipline where precision, foresight, and strategic documentation are as critical as the code itself. Over the years, I've earned a reputation for reliability, thoroughness, and an almost obsessive attention to detail, qualities that have been key in sustaining the stability and growth of Dynatech's flagship platform. Last Thursday's events caught me entirely off guard, despite my experience and anticipation of corporate shifts. I was at a bustling steakhouse, a favorite spot among some of Dynatech's key clients and partners, taking a late lunch after a morning of technical reviews. The restaurant was filled with familiar faces, clients I had collaborated with for years, engineers I had mentored, and even a few industry acquaintances. It was a familiar environment, one where professionalism was expected and reputations were carefully maintained. Suddenly, my professional world was turned upside down. Derek Caldwell, my immediate superior and the company's VP of engineering, approached our table with a demeanor more suited to a courtroom than a restaurant. Without any prior warning or private discussion, he launched into a public dismissal that echoed across the room. His voice was sharp, deliberate, and cruelly dismissive. He called me dead weight, right there in front of the assembled clients and colleagues. It was a calculated humiliation, designed to undermine not only my position, but also my professional standing in the eyes of those whose respect I had worked hard to earn. I remember the exact moment his words landed. My initial response was internal, a strategic pause. I kept my face neutral, maintained my composure, and chose my words carefully. Out loud, I said simply, "Understood." That single phrase was far from a submission. It was a tacit acknowledgement of the situation and the beginning of a measured response. I was documenting everything mentally, the phrasing of his accusations, the reactions of the clients around us, even the ambient noise of the bustling steakhouse, which would serve as a subtle reminder of the public nature of this confrontation. As Derek continued, oblivious to the weight of his actions, I noticed a man seated at the next table observing the exchange with a quiet intensity. He was an unassuming figure, dressed professionally, but without the flashing accessories or overt signs of wealth that usually mark high-profile investors. When Derek's tirade concluded, this man slid a card across the table towards me. The card was plain, but carried an unmistakable weight. My office, 9 a.m., was written clearly on its face, an invitation that felt less like charity and more like an opportunity. That moment crystallized everything for me. It was a turning point, representing the thin line between public professional humiliation and the possibility of a strategic comeback. My mind shifted gears immediately, from the shock of betrayal to the calculation of next steps. I began to catalogue every detail: the venue, the timing, the key witnesses, and the unexpected presence of this silent observer who had extended an offer that could change everything. This wasn't just about losing a job. It was about protecting years of hard-earned expertise, safeguarding the platform I had built, and navigating the complex corporate and legal landscapes ahead. In that packed steakhouse, surrounded by the murmur of clinking glasses and quiet conversations, a new chapter was being written, one that demanded professionalism, patience, and a strategic mindset to ensure that what started as a public firing wouldn't end as a professional defeat. Over the span of 15 years at Dynatech Solutions, my role evolved far beyond that of a typical software architect. I was integral to the conception, design, and continuous refinement of Dynatech's flagship platform, the backbone of the company's product suite that currently generates over $120 million in annual revenue. This platform was not built overnight. It was the result of iterative development cycles, strategic architectural decisions, and rigorous operational oversight, all guided by an unwavering commitment to scalability, security, and efficiency. When I first joined Dynatech, the platform was in its infancy, struggling with reliability issues and limited feature sets that constrained client adoption. Recognizing these challenges, I proposed a phased redevelopment plan that focused on modularizing the architecture, improving maintainability, and incorporating automated testing frameworks. Over the next decade and a half, I led 3 major iterations of the platform, each introducing substantial enhancements that not only improved performance but also optimized operational costs. One of the most significant achievements during my tenure was the implementation of a containerized microservices architecture, which replaced the monolithic system that had become increasingly brittle. This shift allowed for more agile deployments and improved fault isolation, directly contributing to a reduction in system downtime by 40%. The operational savings from these improvements have been conservatively estimated at $5 million annually, figures validated through internal financial audits and cross-checked with Dynatech's CFO office reports. Beyond the technical aspects, my responsibilities extended to managing a dedicated team of engineers, ranging from junior developers to senior specialists, coordinating cross-functional collaboration with product management and client services. I mentored rising talent, establishing code quality standards and knowledge-sharing practices that fostered a culture of continuous improvement. My leadership role wasn't just about writing code, it was about ensuring that every architectural decision aligned with long-term business objectives, compliance requirements, and client expectations. Documentation has always been one of my professional cornerstones. Every design document, API specification, and deployment checklist was meticulously maintained in version-controlled repositories. I ensured that system diagrams accurately reflected the evolving architecture, a practice that proved invaluable during onboarding new engineers and performing audits. This level of detail wasn't just about internal utility, it was critical in safeguarding intellectual property and facilitating seamless client integrations. For instance, when onboarding Dynatech's largest clients, I personally supervised the integration checkpoints, coordinating with their IT teams to ensure compliance with SLAs and data protection protocols. My compensation, reflective of my expertise and the critical nature of my role, stood at $185,000 annually. The employment contract I signed included a severance vesting clause, which activates after 10 years of continuous service, a safeguard recognizing my long-term investment in the company's success. This clause also enforced a non-compete agreement with specific terms concerning platform code ownership and post-termination conduct. These contractual elements were negotiated carefully, with legal counsel advising on protecting both my interests and the company's assets. Despite my clear value, the past year brought increased pressure from upper management to reduce operational costs. While I understood the business imperative to improve margins, I was confident that any cost-cutting measures needed to be balanced with risk assessment and system stability considerations. I maintained comprehensive backups of all system components and preserved detailed email trails going back 5 years, communications that documented project leadership, architectural decisions, and client interactions. These records were stored securely with redundant encryption and access logs, anticipating that such thoroughness might one day be crucial. Although I was aware of the shifting company dynamics, I had no inkling that my position was so precarious that Derek Caldwell, the VP of Engineering, would publicly terminate me without prior warning or attempt at private resolution. The public nature of the firing, right in the presence of key clients, was not only unprofessional but also strategically reckless. It disregarded the complexity and criticality of the platform I had nurtured, as well as the potential operational fallout from abruptly removing the steward of this knowledge. In retrospect, the foundation I built over those 15 years, my technical contributions, leadership, and contractual safeguards, was not only the source of my professional identity, but also the critical leverage I would later need to methodically challenge this betrayal. Each document archived, each line of code authored, and every client integration managed would become pieces of evidence in a larger strategic response. My professional journey was more than a resume. It was a dossier of tangible value and documented expertise that no impulsive cost-cutting decision could erase. Derek Caldwell had been in the VP of Engineering seat for about 3 years when the pressure from shareholders started mounting, an almost predictable consequence of the market's tightening and the company's recent underperformance relative to its projections. The mandate was clear and uncompromising: Reduce operational expenses by at least 15% in the current fiscal year. Derek, under this mandate, was scrambling to demonstrate decisive action, and unfortunately my position quickly became a convenient target. My $185,000 salary, combined with the perception of me as a high-cost resource, made me vulnerable in the eyes of upper management and financial stakeholders, hungry to preserve profit margins. What Derek failed to appreciate, or perhaps chose to ignore, was the strategic value embedded in my role. Over my tenure, I had developed an intimate understanding of the platform's architectural nuances and had cultivated exclusive operational knowledge that underpinned service continuity. My leadership wasn't easily replaceable, and the platform's system dependencies were tightly coupled with my expertise. Yet Derek's approach was reductive. He saw only the immediate cost savings to be gained by replacing me with less expensive junior engineers. He authorized the hiring of 3 junior software engineers, each with a salary roughly $85,000, less than half my compensation. This was his calculated step to slash expenses by replacing what he perceived as an expensive single point with cheaper labor. However, the plan was flawed in its oversight of critical factors. Derek's strategy hinged on terminating me abruptly in a public and humiliating fashion, without proper knowledge transfer or transition protocols. His intention was to cite performance issues as justification, which would serve 2 purposes: deny me the severance benefits tied to my contract and assert company ownership over the platform's proprietary code. This latter point was significant because Derek was counting on the company's intellectual property clauses to prevent me from leveraging my platform knowledge elsewhere. He was betting that the contractual non-compete would neutralize any threat I might pose if I moved on. But Derek overlooked several key safeguards embedded in my employment agreement. First, the non-compete clause was contingent upon the severance vesting. If severance was withheld improperly, the clause would be unenforceable. Second, the complexity of the platform's architecture meant that knowledge transfer was not a simple handoff. The system involved proprietary modules and undocumented dependencies that only I fully understood. Without me, the risk of operational failure would increase dramatically, a fact that Derek underestimated or chose to ignore in his haste. Adding to this, Derek's unilateral decisions bypassed established knowledge transfer protocols. According to company policy, any transition of proprietary platform responsibilities must involve detailed documentation, system walkthroughs, and client communication plans. Yet I discovered that he had begun onboarding the junior engineers in secrecy, deliberately excluding me from meetings and planning sessions. This covert approach not only endangered platform stability, but also exposed the company to compliance risks, especially since many client service agreements explicitly required continuity assurances and properly managed handovers. Fortunately, I was not alone in recognizing Derek's missteps. Lisa Munro, a senior engineer who reported directly to me and had been instrumental in recent platform upgrades, became an unexpected ally. She was well aware of the technical risks Derek's plan entailed and the ethical concerns raised by his disregard for proper procedures. Lisa's willingness to support a factual, evidence-based accounting of events would prove vital in documenting the breach of both technical and managerial responsibilities. From a professional perspective, I viewed Derek's strategy as short-sighted and reckless, not merely for its operational risks, but also for its legal vulnerabilities. His attempt to characterize my termination as performance-related ignored the extensive record of successful project deliveries, client satisfaction, and cost savings that my documentation substantiated. More importantly, by bypassing contractual obligations and knowledge transfer protocols, he exposed himself and Dynatech Solutions to potential liability. I made a mental note of these leverage points: the severance clause tied to the non-compete, the incomplete knowledge transfer, and the undisclosed onboarding of junior engineers, to be scrutinized with precision in the next stages of my response. Derek's actions, driven by immediate cost-saving pressures and personal ambition, inadvertently set the stage for a confrontation that would hinge on documented facts, contractual interpretation, and technical accountability. Rather than reacting emotionally, I focused on cataloging evidence, understanding legal frameworks, and identifying professional alliances. The stakes were high. The platform's continued stability, my contractual rights, and my professional reputation all depended on measured, strategic responses to the cavalier decisions of a VP blinded by fiscal desperation. In essence, Derek's plan revolved around a flawed calculus: cut salary costs, dismiss the critical architect, and push forward with a cheaper, less experienced team, all while attempting to legally negate severance obligations and ownership claims. But this plan failed to account for the systemic risks latent in the platform's architecture, the enforceable terms of my contract, and the professional integrity I maintained. The coming weeks would reveal how these oversights would become pivotal in reshaping the narrative from scapegoating to accountability. After the initial shock of my public firing had settled into a cold, strategic calm, my first task was to review every piece of official documentation Derek's HR team had provided. The termination packet looked routine on the surface: standard forms, a letter citing performance issues, and a severance denial clause. But as I read through the performance warnings, my professional instincts immediately flagged inconsistencies. Dates didn't align with the email records in my archive. Some warnings referenced meetings I had no record of attending. Other documents contained language that conflicted with the constructive feedback I had consistently received. These were clearly falsified to support an unjust termination. I cross-checked these documents against my meticulously archived email threads and meeting minutes. For over 5 years, I had preserved every communication related to project milestones, performance reviews, and cross-departmental collaborations. This digital trail formed an unbroken chain, proving not only my consistent delivery, but also my proactive engagement in resolving platform issues. None of the allegations Derek's termination letter implied were substantiated by these records. In fact, many emails from my direct reports and clients praised my leadership and technical solutions. Next, I turned my attention to the severance denial. According to my contract, severance fully vests after 10 years of continuous employment, an unambiguous clause I had met comfortably. The denial letter cited performance-related cause, but with the manipulated warnings, this rationale was legally shaky. I knew from preliminary consultations with my employment lawyer that severance agreements could not be arbitrarily withheld without documented cause. I made a note to highlight this discrepancy in my forthcoming legal strategy. More troubling was what I uncovered about the team changes Derek had implemented behind the scenes. Through insider sources and an anonymous tip from Lisa Monroe, my trusted senior engineer, I learned Derek had quietly onboarded 3 junior engineers over the past 2 months. These hires were introduced without any proper knowledge transfer or inclusion of myself in transition meetings, a direct violation of company policy. Lisa provided me with internal meeting invites and email chains, proving that Derek had systematically excluded me from critical discussions about platform modifications and staff onboarding. This secretive onboarding process immediately raised a red flag about potential operational risks. The Dynatech platform's architecture was complex and highly interwoven. Each module relied on precise interdependencies only fully documented in my design schemas and system diagrams. Without my guidance, these junior engineers lacked the contextual knowledge necessary to maintain platform stability. I reviewed the latest system logs and maintenance reports and noticed a subtle rise in error rates and latency spikes, early indicators of the instability Derek's rushed replacement strategy was causing. Financial audits also revealed that $118,000 was withheld from my final paycheck, an amount inconsistent with my accrued entitlements. This sum included severance, unused vacation payout, and a performance bonus previously approved by the CFO. I requested formal explanations through HR channels, which were met with vague evasions. This added another layer of contractual breach to Derek's actions. The email correspondence I collected painted a damning picture of Derek's intent. Directives from him explicitly ordered the exclusion of redundant senior staff from transition meetings and discouraged any knowledge-sharing sessions involving me. One email thread between Derek and HR explicitly discussed minimizing severance exposure by fabricating performance issues, a tactic that bordered on unlawful employment practices. I then conducted a thorough analysis of the platform's architecture as it stood at the time of my termination. Key modules, particularly those handling real-time data processing and client integrations, lacked up-to-date documentation besides my own. The team's internal wiki and knowledge base were incomplete, outdated, and inaccessible to the new hires. Without the institutional knowledge I held, the risk of critical failures and non-compliance with client SLAs was escalating. These gaps not only jeopardized Dynatech's service commitments, but also exposed the company to potential penalties under regulatory frameworks governing data security and service continuity. Throughout this review, I maintained a neutral demeanor. Emotion would have been counterproductive. My focus was on the strategic implications and gathering actionable evidence. I mentally catalogued the leverage points emerging from this deep dive: the falsification of performance warnings, undermining the severance denial, the unauthorized onboarding of juniors without knowledge transfer, breaching company policy, the financial discrepancies suggesting withheld compensation, and the growing operational risks threatening client relationships and regulatory compliance. Lisa Monroe's willingness to provide witness statements was invaluable. She confirmed the exclusionary tactics Derek employed and attested to the technical fragility introduced by his abrupt personnel shifts. Together, we began drafting a detailed timeline correlating Derek's decisions with rising platform incidents and contract violations. This comprehensive assessment positioned me to confront Derek's reckless cost-cutting with irrefutable facts and legal precision. In the weeks that followed, I prepared to translate these findings into formal claims, confident that this methodical documentation and professional analysis would form the backbone of a robust response, one aimed at protecting my contractual rights, safeguarding Dynatech's platform integrity, and holding negligent leadership accountable. The complex interplay of technical knowledge, contractual language, and regulatory requirements was becoming clearer, guiding my next strategic moves with clarity and purpose. After completing my initial assessment, I knew the next step was to initiate a formal legal consultation to ensure my response was grounded in solid employment law and contract enforcement strategy. I contacted Karen Fields, a seasoned employment lawyer with a strong track record, handling wrongful termination cases in the tech sector. Karen and I had a preliminary call the day after the incident, during which I outlined the situation and the documentation I had amassed. Her immediate advice was clear: compile a comprehensive chronological timeline of all relevant communications, contracts, and technical documentation. This timeline would serve as the foundation for any legal claim or negotiation. Over the following days, my focus was laser-sharp. I began the meticulous process of organizing every piece of evidence I had on hand. I exported email threads going back 5 years, focusing on performance reviews, project updates, client communications, and directives that involved platform architecture decisions. Each email was saved with metadata intact, timestamps, sender and recipient details, to preserve authenticity. I created a secure, encrypted digital folder, segregating documents into categories: contracts, performance documentation, system reports, communications, and financial records. For each document, I drafted brief annotations, summarizing its relevance, ensuring Karen could quickly grasp the key points during review. Central to this evidence collection was my employment contract, which I reviewed line by line. The severance clause, non-compete agreement, and intellectual property terms were pivotal. The severance vesting after 10 years was a contractual right Derek had attempted to circumvent through falsified performance warnings. I flagged these warnings side by side with the pristine history of positive feedback and successful project leadership documented in my emails and meeting minutes. This contrast was stark and undeniable. Parallel to my legal preparations, I reached out to Lisa Monroe, my trusted senior engineer and longtime collaborator. Lisa had been an invaluable source of insider information regarding Derek's covert onboarding of junior engineers. She provided copies of internal meeting invitations and email chains that explicitly excluded me, despite my role as platform architect. Lisa also volunteered to provide a detailed witness statement, corroborating the absence of formal knowledge transfer and the operational risks her team was experiencing. Her technical testimony was crucial. She could articulate, in professional terms, how Derek's actions were destabilizing the platform. Together, Lisa and I constructed a timeline overlaying Derek's personnel decisions with the emergent system irregularities. We noted that increases in error rates and latency spikes coincided precisely with the onboarding of junior engineers without oversight or adequate training. This nexus between staffing changes and system instability formed a key pillar of our argument. It demonstrated not only breach of company policy, but also a tangible risk to client service agreements and regulatory compliance. Recognizing the potential leverage this represented, I ensured all technical documentation was up to date and accessible. I compiled architectural diagrams, API specifications, deployment checklists, and code repository access logs. These documents proved the complexity and fragility of the platform's architecture, knowledge that was effectively locked within my expertise. I duplicated and encrypted these files on secure servers under my control, anticipating that they might be instrumental in any negotiations or disputes over intellectual property rights. Financial discrepancies added another layer to the case. Careful review of my final paycheck, cross-referenced against payroll records and approved bonuses, revealed $118,000 withheld without explanation. This amount included severance pay, unused vacation balances, and performance bonuses. I documented each withheld component and notified Karen, who confirmed that withholding accrued compensation without valid cause was a statutory violation that strengthened our position. Throughout this process, I kept an internal to-do log summarizing emerging leverage points, severance clause tied to non-compete enforcement, illegal to withhold without cause, falsified performance warnings undermining termination justification, unauthorized onboarding of junior engineers without knowledge transfer, breach of company policy, and potential operational risk, client contract risks resulting from platform instability, financial irregularities regarding withheld pay, regulatory compliance implications related to service continuity and data integrity. Each of these points was supported by concrete evidence, emails, documented procedures, witness statements, and system metrics. My strategic perspective was to transform these observations into a unified legal and professional challenge. With Karen's guidance, I also began drafting an initial outline for formal complaints, targeting wrongful termination, contract breaches, and regulatory non-compliance. The goal was to create a compelling narrative that combined technical risk assessment with legal violations, thereby maximizing pressure on Dynatech's management to reconsider their position. I anticipated that any early outreach would require precision and professionalism, so I prepared communications that were factual, unemotional, and legally sound. In parallel, I continued to maintain my professional relationships and client contacts discreetly, aware that maintaining industry reputation was critical. I prepared to offer interim consulting support if necessary, an olive branch demonstrating my commitment to platform stability, even amid conflict. This nuanced stance underscored my objective, a strategic, measured response focused on resolution and accountability rather than confrontation. By the end of this phase, my preparations had evolved into a comprehensive dossier. The collaboration with Lisa had solidified a credible technical witness account. Karen's legal expertise ensured our claims were framed within enforceable statutes and precedent. My documentation was airtight, and my strategic plan clear: leverage contractual rights and documented evidence to challenge the termination, expose management's reckless missteps, and protect the platform's integrity. This systematic approach was essential. In the complex environment of corporate technology and employment law, success depended on facts, precision, and patience, not impulsive reactions. I was ready to proceed, fully equipped to turn a wrongful firing into a professional reckoning. With all initial evidence compiled and organized, I scheduled a detailed meeting with Karen Fields to translate my documentation into a strategic legal framework. Karen brought not only a sharp legal mind, but a deep understanding of the tech industry's nuances, which was critical for framing the technical complexities within employment law. During our first comprehensive review, she immediately identified multiple clear-cut violations that could form the backbone of a wrongful termination claim, and possibly more. First and foremost, Karen highlighted the severance clause within my employment contract. The contract unequivocally stipulates that severance benefits vest after 10 years of continuous service, a milestone I had clearly passed. Yet Dynatech's denial, citing performance issues, was undermined by the fabricated warnings and the absence of any documented performance degradation in the extensive email history I provided. Karen explained that falsifying documentation to deny severance could constitute a breach of contract and potentially bad faith termination, legal grounds that could entitle me to both compensation and damages related to reputational harm. Beyond severance, Karen raised the prospect of a breach of fiduciary duty on Derek Caldwell's part. As VP of Engineering, Derek had a responsibility not just to manage costs, but to safeguard the long-term stability of Dynatech's flagship platform. By excluding me from knowledge transfer and transition meetings, secretly onboarding junior engineers without any formal training protocols, and ignoring known system dependencies, Derek neglected this fiduciary obligation. This dereliction exposed the company to operational risk and regulatory non-compliance, especially given contractual SLAs with clients that mandated continuity and security assurances. To substantiate these claims, we engaged independent technical consultants specializing in software architecture and enterprise systems. Their task was twofold: review the platform's current state, absent my oversight, and evaluate the risk implications of Derek's abrupt staffing changes. The consultants confirmed what Lisa Monroe and I already suspected. The platform's architecture was indeed fragile, without the stewarding presence of an experienced architect. Key modules lacked formal documentation, system interdependencies were undocumented or poorly understood by the junior hires, and error rates had spiked in tandem with the onboarding timeline. The consultants concluded that continued operation under the current regime presented a significant risk of critical outages and contractual breaches with clients. Armed with these expert assessments, Karen and I drafted formal complaints to both the Department of Labor and the state's employment tribunal. The complaints were meticulously constructed, citing clear contract violations, wrongful termination based on fabricated performance issues, unlawful withholding of severance pay, and neglect of fiduciary duty. Additionally, the complaints referenced regulatory concerns around labor practices and operational compliance risks that stemmed from the incomplete knowledge transfer and unapproved staffing changes. We detailed how these issues directly threatened client service agreements, potentially exposing Dynatech to financial penalties and reputational damage. Included in the filings were precise exhibits, copies of the falsified performance warnings juxtaposed with authentic email praise and project success metrics, my original employment contract highlighting the severance and non-compete clauses, email directives from Derek instructing exclusion of senior staff, and minimization of severance liabilities, witness statements from Lisa Monroe confirming exclusion from transition meetings and observing technical instability, technical expert, reports detailing system fragility and potential compliance violations, payroll audits indicating $118,000 withheld from my final compensation without lawful justification. The magnitude of the financial claims we prepared was comprehensive: $350,000 in damages, encompassing withheld severance, unpaid bonuses, reputational harm, and anticipated legal costs. Karen advised that while the monetary figure was important, the strategic emphasis was on demonstrating a pattern of misconduct and operational negligence that could not be ignored by regulators or the company's board. Throughout this process, I maintained professional discipline. I prepared for every legal briefing with precision, ensuring all statements and filings were factual, evidence-backed, and devoid of emotional language. This approach served two purposes. It strengthened the credibility of the case and protected my standing with industry peers and clients. Karen commended this stance, emphasizing that in contested employment disputes, the narrative of professionalism, grounded in documented facts and expert testimony, often prevails over impulsive reactions or public confrontations. We also began outlining potential settlement negotiations, recognizing that Dynatech's exposure to regulatory sanctions and client contract breaches created leverage for a favorable resolution. However, Karen advised caution. Any offers would be evaluated only after careful review of Dynatech's response to our formal complaints and their willingness to address the operational risks that had been laid bare. Parallel to the legal preparations, I coordinated with Lisa to continue monitoring platform performance metrics and client service reports. Our goal was to maintain an up-to-date factual record of any system disruptions or escalations that could further substantiate the claims of risk and negligence. This ongoing data collection ensured that our case remained dynamic and responsive to real-time developments within Dynatech. By the end of this phase, the legal and technical foundations of the case were firmly in place. Karen's identification of severance contract violations and Derek's fiduciary breaches, supported by technical expert confirmations, transformed what initially felt like a personal setback into a structured, defensible claim. The balance of power was shifting from a narrative of unilateral dismissal to one anchored in accountability, contract enforcement, and professional integrity. This methodical groundwork positioned me to escalate the situation with confidence, ensuring that every step taken was measured, documented, and legally sound, setting the stage for the next phase of strategic action. After finalizing our comprehensive legal strategy with Karen, I took immediate, deliberate steps to formalize our position. The first action was serving Derek Caldwell and Dynatech Solutions with official legal notices. These documents meticulously cited their breaches of contract, specifically the wrongful termination based on fabricated performance issues and the unlawful denial of severance payments, and highlighted regulatory non-compliance related to labor practices and knowledge transfer protocols. The notices were carefully drafted to underscore not only the contractual violations, but also the operational and compliance risks posed by their reckless handling of the platform transition. I ensured the delivery followed strict procedural requirements to establish a clear paper trail. Certified mail receipts and digital acknowledgements confirmed the notices reached both Derek personally and Dynatech's legal department within the same business day. This formal step was critical. It marked the transition from informal grievances to documented legal claims, setting deadlines for response and signaling the seriousness of the situation. Simultaneously, I reached out to several of Dynatech's key clients, those whose operations depended heavily on the platform's stability. My communication was professional and measured, an update rather than an alarm. I notified them of the potential risk of service disruption stemming from an incomplete knowledge transfer process, emphasizing my continued commitment to the platform's integrity and their business continuity. I offered interim consulting support on a limited basis, assuring them they would receive expert guidance during this precarious period, while making clear that my involvement was contingent on fair contractual terms and respect for intellectual property rights. This client communication served multiple strategic purposes. First, it reinforced my professional reputation as a reliable architect who prioritizes client interests despite internal conflicts. Second, it subtly applied pressure on Dynatech by informing clients of internal risks, a factor that could influence their ongoing contracts and willingness to tolerate service interruptions. Lastly, it positioned me as a responsible stakeholder ready and willing to mitigate damage, rather than a disgruntled former employee acting out of spite. Throughout this period, I maintained an unwavering professional decorum in all correspondence with Dynatech and Derek. I responded promptly to any inquiries or requests, carefully avoiding the disclosure of legal strategies or emotional reactions. My tone was factual, concise, and solution-oriented, underscoring my commitment to resolving these issues constructively. This approach helped prevent any mischaracterization of my actions as adversarial or disruptive, which could undermine my credibility. Behind the scenes, I coordinated closely with Karen to monitor Dynatech's responses. Derek and the company's legal team remained largely silent initially, apparently unaware of the full extent of our evidence and preparations. This informational asymmetry worked to our advantage, allowing us to control the timing and content of disclosures. I remained vigilant, documenting every interaction and logging all communications to maintain an airtight record. Meanwhile, a significant development unfolded. Elliott Grant, the quiet billionaire investor who had approached me at the steakhouse, formally extended an employment offer. His proposal included an annual salary of $250,000 plus equity options, reflecting his confidence in my expertise and the strategic value of my platform knowledge. After careful consideration and consultation with Karen, I accepted. This move was both a professional advancement and a tactical position that offered financial security and a stronger platform from which to pursue my claims against Dynatech. Despite this new opportunity, I maintained strict confidentiality about the legal proceedings and my negotiations with Elliott when communicating with Dynatech. My responses remained measured and professional, ensuring no premature revelations could weaken my negotiating position or provide Derek with tactical advantages. At this juncture, the corporate battlefield was set. I had formally initiated legal action, informed key stakeholders of operational risks, secured a powerful ally in Elliott Grant, and maintained professional composure despite the ongoing turmoil. Derek remained unaware of the detailed evidence and strategic depth behind my actions. The next phases would test the durability of these preparations as pressures mounted on all sides, but I was confident that my methodical, documented approach provided a foundation for systematic accountability and eventual resolution. In the weeks following my formal notices and client communications, the operational consequences of Derek's reckless decisions began to manifest with alarming clarity. It started subtly, sporadic error reports and minor latency spikes that, on their own, might have been dismissed as routine glitches. But soon, these anomalies escalated into critical system outages affecting 3 of Dynatech's largest clients, all of whom depended on our platform for real-time data processing and business-critical applications. The first incident occurred late one Tuesday afternoon. The client's transaction processing module froze, causing delays that cascaded into their customer service systems. The outage lasted several hours, during which my former colleagues scrambled to identify the root cause. Without my intimate understanding of the architecture and its undocumented dependencies, their efforts were hampered. Lisa Monroe, still valiantly trying to patch the gaps left by Derek's haphazard staffing, informed me that the junior engineers lacked the context to troubleshoot these cascading failures effectively. Within days, 2 more major clients reported significant disruptions. Time-sensitive data feeds halted, triggering SLA breach alarms. These service interruptions triggered a flurry of urgent complaints directed at Dynatech's customer success teams. The messaging was consistent. There was an unacceptable degradation in platform reliability, and immediate remedial action was demanded. Internally, these complaints escalated to the company's executive level, reaching the board of directors. The board convened an emergency meeting, pressing Derek to deliver swift solutions and mitigate further damage. Their mandate was clear: restore platform stability or face severe financial and reputational consequences. Derek, under mounting pressure, attempted to reassure the board, insisting his replacement team could manage the crisis. However, the technical reports and incident logs painted a starkly different picture. Lisa's candid updates revealed that without my involvement, the team struggled not only to respond to outages, but also to prevent them. The junior engineers were overwhelmed by the platform's complexity and lacked access to the comprehensive design documentation I had meticulously maintained. Furthermore, the incomplete knowledge transfer created blind spots in monitoring critical system modules, delaying detection of anomalies. This operational fragility was a direct consequence of Derek's unauthorized onboarding strategy and exclusionary transition tactics. Simultaneously, the regulatory ramifications of these failures began to surface. Following the formal complaints I had filed with the Department of Labor and the State Employment Tribunal, investigators initiated preliminary inquiries into Dynatech's labor practices and compliance with contractual SLAs. The timing was significant. The operational instability underscored the practical risks of Derek's management decisions, lending credibility to claims of negligence and breach of fiduciary duty. Amid this turmoil, Derek's desperation intensified. He began reaching out to me repeatedly, initially through terse emails, then through direct phone calls, requesting assistance to stabilize the platform. The tone shifted from authoritative to pleading, offering me a consulting contract with fees of $50,000 to lend my expertise temporarily. These overtures were tactically inconsistent. On the one hand, they implicitly acknowledged my indispensability. On the other, they attempted to frame my contributions as a temporary favor rather than recognition of contractual obligations. I declined these offers professionally, responding with a concise message directing Derek to coordinate through legal counsel. This refusal was strategic. Accepting any role under these conditions could undermine my legal position by suggesting voluntary cooperation or tacit acceptance of the termination's legitimacy. Maintaining this boundary preserved the integrity of my claims, while reinforcing that any engagement must respect my contractual rights and professional dignity. At the same time, client attrition began to accelerate. Several of Dynatech's customers, already shaken by repeated outages and uncertain about the company's capacity to safeguard their operations, started to explore alternative vendors. The board's scrutiny intensified as financial forecasts adjusted downward in response to potential contract losses and regulatory fines. Throughout this period, I maintained a strict professional demeanor. All correspondence with Dynatech's legal team and representatives was timely and fact-based, avoiding speculation or emotional language. Behind the scenes, I continued coordinating with Karen and Lisa, updating our evidence repository with the latest incident reports, client communications, and regulatory developments. This unfolding crisis highlighted the cascading consequences of Derek's short-sighted cost-cutting. Not only did it destabilize a critical revenue-generating platform, but it also exposed the company to escalating financial, legal, and reputational risks. The situation had evolved beyond a personal dispute. It was now a corporate governance failure with tangible operational fallout. Derek's attempts to manage the crisis only deepened the void left by his initial disregard for proper knowledge transfer and contractual adherence. As the weeks progressed, it became clear that the platform issues were not mere technical hiccups, but symptoms of systemic instability caused by the abrupt removal of experienced stewardship and inadequate staffing transitions. This professional reality underscored the leverage points in our legal strategy, reinforcing the argument that Derek's actions constituted a breach of fiduciary duty with measurable harm to Dynatech's business. The mounting pressure set the stage for the impending regulatory scrutiny and potential legal actions that would follow. My role, as both a knowledgeable former architect and a documented claimant, positioned me uniquely to influence the outcome. The next critical phases would require continued strategic patience, precise communication, and unwavering commitment to professional rigor as the situation escalated toward formal dispute resolution. In this precarious environment, the path forward demanded maintaining control over the narrative and evidence, ensuring that each development advanced the case without premature disclosures or concessions. The stakes were higher than ever, and every move had to be calculated with an eye toward the eventual resolution that respected both justice and professional integrity. Filing the lawsuit was a pivotal step, a transition from careful preparation to formal legal escalation. With Karen's guidance, I compiled an exhaustive dossier that meticulously documented every facet of the wrongful termination and contractual violations. The complaint laid out the narrative with precision: the fabricated performance warnings, the severance denial contrary to explicit contract terms, and the reckless onboarding of junior engineers without required knowledge transfer. Each claim was supported by detailed exhibits, email correspondence, internal memos, system architecture diagrams, and witness testimonies. The documentation was structured not only to prove the facts, but to withstand rigorous legal scrutiny. We filed the lawsuit with the State Employment Tribunal and submitted a parallel complaint to the Department of Labor. The Labor Department's interest quickly deepened, initiating a thorough investigation into Dynatech's labor practices. Their inquiry extended beyond my individual case, probing potential patterns of misconduct in employment termination and severance handling. The regulatory scrutiny added an institutional weight to the claims, elevating our leverage significantly. Our filing articulated how Derek Caldwell's actions violated not just contractual obligations, but fiduciary duties inherent to his VP position. By circumventing proper knowledge transfer protocols and excluding me from critical discussions, Derek increased systemic risk to Dynatech's platform and breached client service agreements. Technical experts' reports, which we annexed as exhibits, confirmed the raised error rates and documented the architectural fragility directly resulting from his decisions. As the Department of Labor investigation unfolded, they requested additional evidence, including payroll records, internal communications, and client service reports. I worked closely with Karen to provide comprehensive, organized responses promptly. Maintaining transparency and responsiveness helped underscore the credibility and seriousness of our allegations. Meanwhile, the Employment Tribunal scheduled preliminary hearings to assess the validity of the claims, keeping the pressure on Dynatech's legal team. Concurrently, several of Dynatech's major clients received communications alerting them to the ongoing instability risks due to incomplete platform knowledge transfer. Their legal departments began reviewing contractual compliance, and some issued formal notices demanding remediation plans. These client actions compounded the company's exposure, increasing boardroom anxiety and pressuring leadership to respond effectively. Derek's reaction was increasingly erratic. A series of emails and calls revealed his growing desperation to contain the fallout. He proposed settlement terms that included my reinstatement and compensation packages. I declined to engage directly, deferring all communication to my legal team, ensuring that no informal agreements could jeopardize the case or dilute our leverage. At the same time, Derek attempted to leverage HR channels to intimidate me, sending inquiries about my external consulting engagement with Elliott Grant. These inquiries were met with firm legal responses, emphasizing my contractual rights and contesting any attempts at harassment or retaliatory action. These defensive measures reinforced the professionalism and legal grounding of our position. Throughout this period, I maintained a disciplined approach to all professional interactions. Each response was carefully drafted to be factual, free of emotion, and aligned with legal strategy. I continued to document every interaction, creating a comprehensive audit trail that would support any future proceedings. The mounting regulatory and client pressures forced Dynatech's board to initiate internal reviews. Early findings revealed gaps in compliance and governance failures, exacerbated by Derek's unilateral actions. These revelations, while confidential, leaked partially to industry observers, further damaging Dynatech's market reputation. The combined weight of legal action, regulatory investigations, and client dissatisfaction created a multifaceted challenge for Dynatech's leadership. My strategic approach turned what had begun as a personal professional setback into a systemic reckoning, holding the company accountable on multiple fronts. The situation remained fluid and fraught with tension as our case advanced through legal channels, setting the stage for consequential developments ahead. The consequences of Derek Caldwell's reckless decisions began to ripple through Dynatech Solutions with an intensity that no one in leadership could ignore. Within a matter of weeks following the formal lawsuit and regulatory complaints, the company's board convened multiple emergency sessions. The findings from their internal investigations were damning. Derek's unilateral termination of my role without proper knowledge transfer had directly contributed to cascading platform failures, client contract breaches, and a breakdown in compliance governance. Ultimately, the board voted unanimously to remove Derek from his position as VP of Engineering, an action reflecting not just operational necessity, but a clear repudiation of his leadership failures. Dynatech's financial exposure escalated rapidly. Regulators imposed fines exceeding $500,000, citing breaches of labor laws related to wrongful termination and severance denial, as well as violations of contractual obligations to key clients. These penalties were compounded by projected losses from client attrition and emergency remediation efforts. Shareholders, alarmed by the public scandal and operational instability, demanded an immediate company-wide restructuring. They insisted on new oversight mechanisms to prevent unilateral decisions that endangered both personnel rights and platform integrity. Media outlets picked up the story, framing it as a cautionary tale of corporate mismanagement and leadership failure. Trade publications detailed the sequence of events, highlighting how Derek's impulsive cost-cutting had triggered a systemic collapse. jeopardizing a platform responsible for over $120 million in revenue. Interviews with industry analysts underscored the importance of robust governance and knowledge transfer in protecting high-value technical assets. While the coverage was measured, it inevitably cast a shadow on Dynatech's leadership reputation. An unexpected outcome of this turmoil was the emergence of additional employees willing to come forward with similar accounts of mistreatment and procedural lapses under Derek's tenure. Human Resources, under new interim leadership, initiated a confidential review of these claims, indicating a broader pattern of managerial neglect. This further weakened Derek's standing within the company and reinforced the board's decision to distance themselves from his leadership. From a personal standpoint, the legal judgments delivered tangible restitution. The court awarded me $385,000 covering back pay, fully vested severance, withheld bonuses, and additional damages for reputational harm and emotional distress. These financial awards reflected not just contract enforcement, but recognition of the professional injustice I endured. The judgments also included injunctive relief, mandating Dynatech to revise their termination policies and knowledge transfer protocols, steps designed to prevent recurrence of similar incidents. Meanwhile, my new role at Elliott Grant's firm began to yield professional dividends. Elliott's venture rapidly leveraged my deep platform expertise to secure new clients, capitalizing on enhanced product stability and strategic development. I contributed not only technical leadership, but also governance insights shaped by my experience at Dynatech, helping the startup avoid pitfalls related to knowledge management and contractual clarity. This transition underscored how measured professionalism and documented expertise could convert adversity into opportunity. Conversely, Derek's professional trajectory suffered irreparable damage. Following his removal, recruitment firms specializing in tech leadership flagged him as a high-risk candidate. Industry networks circulated cautionary advisories, limiting his access to senior positions. His public association with the Dynatech debacle made it difficult to secure comparable roles, effectively sidelining his career. The contrast between our outcomes underscored the consequences of leadership driven by short-term expediency rather than strategic responsibility. For Dynatech, the aftermath involved costly audits and corrective measures. The company invested heavily in comprehensive training programs, knowledge base overhauls, and compliance system upgrades. External consultants were engaged to implement governance frameworks aligned with industry best practices. These initiatives, while necessary, strained operational budgets and diverted resources from growth initiatives. Shareholder confidence remained fragile as the company worked to restore stability and repair its public image. Throughout these developments, I maintained a disciplined focus on professionalism. I continued to document all communications and milestones related to the case, ensuring a clear audit trail. My public statements were carefully crafted to emphasize facts and lessons learned, avoiding personal attacks or sensationalism. This approach solidified my reputation as a measured, principled professional who had successfully navigated corporate adversity through strategy and evidence. The unfolding scenario was a vivid lesson in the power of systematic accountability. It illustrated how thorough documentation, contractual knowledge, and strategic legal action could expose and correct managerial misconduct without resorting to emotional confrontation. The professional landscape, though fraught with challenges, responded predictably when facts and due process were presented with rigor. At this juncture, the situation remained dynamic. While the immediate legal battles had yielded favorable outcomes, the broader impacts on Dynatech's organizational culture and market position continued to unfold. The company's leadership transition and restructuring process were ongoing, with significant pressure to demonstrate effective governance reforms. For my part, the experience underscored the necessity of vigilance and strategic patience in protecting one's professional value against corporate betrayal. The next phases would involve monitoring the implementation of mandated reforms, engaging with industry peers on best practices, and leveraging this experience to further strengthen my role at Elliott's venture. The stakes remained high, but the foundation of methodical preparation and professional integrity provided a stable platform from which to advance. Derek's removal marked a pivotal moment in this process, not an end, but a critical turning point in a complex professional reckoning. The court's ruling was a decisive moment in this protracted professional and legal confrontation. The judgment mandated Dynatech Solutions to pay $385,000 in damages, encompassing my back pay, fully vested severance, withheld bonuses, and additional compensation for reputational harm. The monetary award wasn't simply a punitive figure, but a formal recognition of the contract breaches and wrongful termination that had been meticulously documented throughout the case. The court's detailed opinion underscored the clear violations of my employment contract, particularly the severance clause, which vested after 10 years of continuous service, an indisputable contractual right that Derek Caldwell and Dynatech had unlawfully tried to circumvent. Beyond the financial restitution, the court imposed significant regulatory sanctions on Dynatech. These included a 12-month probationary period, during which the company was required to implement and maintain comprehensive compliance programs addressing labor practices, termination policies, and knowledge transfer protocols. This probation was not merely symbolic. It involved regular audits by the state's Department of Labor and mandated reporting to ensure adherence to employment laws and contractual obligations. These sanctions reflected systemic failures in governance and managerial oversight, directly tied to Derek's reckless dismissal approach. The impact on Derek Caldwell was professionally catastrophic. The court's findings explicitly referenced his breach of fiduciary duty as VP of Engineering, citing his intentional exclusion of me from critical knowledge transfer processes and his deliberate attempts to fabricate performance issues. Following the ruling, industry regulatory bodies and professional networks formally blacklisted him. Notices circulated among tech leadership circles warning of his involvement in a high-profile wrongful termination case, compounded by poor management decisions that imperiled a major revenue-generating platform. Recruitment agencies specializing in executive placements flagged his name, severely limiting his prospects for future senior roles within the tech sector. Meanwhile, Elliott Grant's venture, which had extended me the opportunity to join their team, benefited markedly from the case's resolution. My comprehensive platform expertise, validated and publicly acknowledged by the legal outcome, enhanced Elliott's firm's credibility in the marketplace. Leveraging the architectural knowledge and governance insights gained during my tenure at Dynatech, I contributed to securing new clients and expanding product offerings. Industry analysts noted the venture's rapid growth and strategic stability, attributing it in part to the expertise I brought on board, which had been battle-tested not only in development, but also in navigating complex organizational challenges. The settlement payments enabled me to exercise equity options within Elliott's company, further solidifying my financial position and stake in the firm's success. These equity awards were negotiated with full awareness of my enhanced professional standing, reflecting the value assigned to my technical leadership and strategic acumen. This transition from a sidelined architect to a key stakeholder underscored the professional vindication achieved through methodical preparation and legal diligence. Industry publications and trade journals extensively analyzed the Dynatech case as a cautionary narrative on the critical importance of contract enforcement and knowledge transfer in technology companies. Articles dissected the interplay between employment law and software architecture governance, emphasizing how neglecting these aspects can lead to significant operational, financial, and reputational damage. The case became required reading in several professional development courses, and I was invited to speak at industry conferences to share insights on managing and protecting intellectual property and contractual rights within complex corporate structures. Moreover, other technology professionals commended the strategic approach I employed, combining rigorous documentation, legal expertise, and professional restraint as a model for addressing workplace injustices. Several colleagues reached out seeking advice on safeguarding their own roles, contracts, and intellectual contributions, creating an informal peer network focused on best practices in employment security and knowledge management. This community engagement further reinforced the broader impact of the case beyond my personal circumstances. While the ruling brought substantial closure regarding the financial and professional harm suffered, it also catalyzed lasting changes within Dynatech. The company was required to revise its employee termination protocols, enforce stricter knowledge transfer processes, and institute ongoing compliance training for management. These reforms, monitored by regulatory bodies during the probation period, aimed to prevent recurrence of similar failures and to restore trust among clients and employees alike. Though the immediate legal battles had reached a significant milestone, the professional and organizational ripples continued to unfold. Dynatech's leadership transition and restructuring efforts were ongoing, with heightened scrutiny from shareholders and regulators. The industry watched closely as the company attempted to rebuild its governance framework and repair its shaken reputation. Meanwhile, Derek's professional trajectory remained constrained, serving as a stark example of the consequences of managerial negligence and ethical lapses. For my part, the judgment did not mark an end, but rather reinforced the importance of the principles I had relied upon: meticulous contractual knowledge, systematic documentation, and measured professional conduct. These elements had transformed a moment of public humiliation into a platform for vindication and influence. The legal victory and regulatory sanctions were critical elements in reshaping the narrative, but the ongoing professional responsibilities and industry engagement continued to demand vigilance and strategic foresight. Thus, while the court's ruling delivered material justice and catalyzed organizational reform, it also illuminated the broader lessons for technology professionals and corporate leaders alike, a reminder that safeguarding intellectual capital and enforcing contractual rights are fundamental to sustaining professional integrity and operational stability in the complex, high-stakes environment of modern software enterprises. Now, as I lead platform strategy at Elliott Grant's firm, the professional landscape has shifted markedly from the precarious position I once occupied. The offer Elliott extended wasn't just a job. It was a strategic partnership, recognizing the depth of expertise I bring in architecting scalable, reliable platforms. The 30% salary increase to $250,000 annually, combined with a 5% equity stake, reflects both the value of my contribution and the trust placed in my leadership capabilities. This equity component aligns my incentives closely with the company's success and secures a stake in the long-term growth of a venture that prioritizes innovation and sound governance. Transitioning into this role afforded me the opportunity not only to apply my architectural skills, but also to contribute to the company's broader strategic vision. My responsibilities encompass overseeing the design and implementation of next-generation platform solutions, integrating robust security and compliance frameworks, and fostering a culture of thorough documentation and accountability. Lessons hard learned from the Dynatech experience. Unlike before, where operational exigencies sometimes overshadowed knowledge sharing, here the emphasis is on sustainable growth, client trust, and proactive risk management. An immediate benefit of this new position has been a healthier work-life balance. The toxic environment of abrupt dismissals and public humiliation gave way to a professional culture that values respectful collaboration and strategic foresight. This change has enabled me to reinvest energy into mentoring emerging talent and refining processes that ensure knowledge transfer is treated as a critical asset rather than a bureaucratic afterthought. The shift has also allowed time to engage with industry forums and contribute thought leadership on the intersection of technology governance and contract enforcement. The industry recognition I've gained is not merely a byproduct of resolution, but an affirmation of the strategic approach I employed. Colleagues and peers have reached out to commend the disciplined combination of technical rigor, legal prudence, and professional restraint demonstrated throughout the ordeal. Invitations to speak at conferences and participate in panel discussions have expanded my network and influence, reinforcing the importance of clear documentation and contractual awareness in technology careers. This recognition also serves as a platform to advocate for stronger protections for engineers whose intellectual property and labor rights are often vulnerable in fast-paced corporate settings. Reflecting on the entire journey, the experience underscored the indispensable value of meticulous documentation. Every architectural diagram, every email trail, and every clarified contract term was instrumental in transforming a moment of personal crisis into a foundation for systemic justice. The strategic patience exercised, eschewing emotional reactivity in favor of professional discipline, proved essential in mounting an effective response. It reaffirmed that in complex corporate environments, measured action backed by evidence often prevails over impulsive confrontation. Public humiliation, as bitter as it was, became a catalyst for opportunity. Rather than allowing that moment to define my professional narrative negatively, I leveraged the situation to expose systemic weaknesses and enforce accountability. This approach not only secured rightful financial restitution and equity, but also repositioned me within an organization that values long-term vision and ethical leadership. The shift from being labeled dead weight to becoming a key strategic leader exemplifies how competence and calm strategy can redefine outcomes in the face of corporate betrayal. I remained vigilant, cognizant that professional environments can be unpredictable and that the safeguards I put in place are not guarantees, but defenses. Maintaining a disciplined commitment to documentation, understanding contractual frameworks, and exercising measured patience are ongoing practices, essential to protecting one's professional worth. This vigilance extends beyond personal interests toward shaping organizational cultures that respect intellectual contributions and contractual integrity. In sum, the journey reaffirmed a central professional truth, that preserving one's expertise through rigorous documentation and contractual clarity, combined with a strategic and composed response to adversity, can convert even the most public professional setbacks into platforms for vindication and influence. Today, my role at Elliott Grant's firm symbolizes not just a career rebound, but a strategic elevation, where experience, evidence, and calm resolve continue to drive sustainable success and industry respect.